Once again, hello everyone, and thank you for joining our workshop today. So today we are going to talk about sudden attack. What does it mean? Well, it's a specific situation when you think that you and your opponent may think that there is no attack and both players has to play positionally. However, due to some drawbacks in either your or enemy position, such an attack appears. So today we are going to learn how to initiate such an attack. And let's start with this first example. In this example, it seems that white has to trade the queens. While what else? Because this rook is vulnerable on a1, and well, it's possible to play queen b1 and avoid the queen's trade, but then the queen on b1 is not well placed, right? Black can, for example, continue with castling. What do you think? Is it possible for white in this position, instead of saving this rook, initiate a sudden attack? Okay, so it seems queen b5 is a move that delivers a check. But what does queen b5 do for the position? It's only a check. Let's try it. So queen b5, bishop d7, everything is protected. So queen b7, then they can play bishop c6, bishop takes, queen takes. Now the queens has to be exchanged, because if white doesn't exchange the queens, it's knight f3, knight h4, and queen g2 mate. Something like that. Maybe not exact that way, but yes, knight f3 provides black with a decisive advantage. So the queens has to be traded, and the material is equal, because originally black was a pawn up. So it seems that queen b5, well, may start a kind of an attack, but doesn't look so well. What do you think? Bishop b7 looks better. Well, bishop b7, queen takes queen, and then what? You lose the bishop, because you don't have this intermediate check. Bishop b2. Okay, bishop b2. Yeah, bishop b2 looks better, but queen takes, pawn takes, f6. Yes, white still has some pressure, but white struggles with their development. No. White is a pawn down, actually. So that's why, yeah, definitely it's not a bad position for white, but they don't have hmm, any significant advantage here. That's why instead of taking the queen, instead of looking for checks here, white is trying to think about such moves that create threats. And in this position, such a move is knight b5 move. How does this move work? Obviously, taking on a1 is a disaster. Once black captures on a1, it's simply bishop a3, their queen is trapped. Or it can be knight d6 check, king goes to e7, and then bishop a3. The queen is trapped, because queen c3 means knight a4, and the queen is lost due to a discovered attack. So queen f1 is probably the best move. Or which piece do we take with? Maybe with a king. And then it's knight c8 can be played, or something else. So knight b7, taking this bishop. So it's a winning position. White has a material advantage. At the moment, it's queen versus two rooks, but you should understand that at the very least, you win one of these two bishops. So queen e1 fails. That's why the game continued with queen takes b3. A takes b3. Even without the queens on the board, this king is still under the attack, because they cannot castle immediately. There is rook a5 as a threat. And bishop b4 means knight c7. So if the bishop retreats, it should retreat somewhere here or there. Well, the bishop here at least loses the pawn on a7. Maybe it's not the only problem, but that's why they played bishop b6. Please continue. What would you play here? So bishop b7. Okay, bishop b7 allows you to win a pawn, right? So bishop takes, knight d6, king d7, knight takes. How does the knight escapes? The knight escapes to a5. Yes, you can win a pawn, but well, if you just equalize the position materially, it's not enough to win, because you originally pawn down. Winning just one pawn isn't enough. What else? Knight d6. So John suggests knight d6. Knight d6 makes sense. For example, king f8. Then what? Then bishop a3. Yeah, bishop a3. Bishop a3, king g8, and then rook c1. Which rook to c1? Any rook to c1. So rook fc, or rook a c1 actually. I don't think there is a big difference, but let it be the a rook. Now you're threatening to take on c8. So bishop d7, bishop takes b7, rook d8, rook fd1, and it should be winning. You won a pawn back, so materially it's equal, but this rook is out of the place of action. That's why there can be multiple threats, including knight c8 actually. It's not a blunder when bishop takes, rook takes, the other bishop takes, but then you take on c1 and this is a pin. Knight c8 allows you to take there and then play bishop e7 to chase the rook away and make the d7 bishop more vulnerable. Maybe first you need to include f4, or maybe you should include f4 later. Fine, so it's winning, but instead of bishop d6, bishop a3 is even better, preventing them from castling. Thanks. A6 was played in the game. Well, it's hard to suggest a move. A6 at least makes sense. Knight goes to d6 anyway. Well, king f8 is a disaster. You win material, two bishops actually with a discovered attack. So king goes to d7 or d8. There is no big issue. I mean, there is no big difference. So rook fd1. Now, again, there is a discovered attack there. Maybe knight c4, maybe knight b7. So they have to escape with the king. This is a key moment of the game. I'm sure when White calculated this line, he did realize that in this position he is still winning due to one tactical feature. Can you please find this feature? Okay, so Mark and Carlos suggested knight b5. That's absolutely right. So it seems to me that Mark is getting much, much better. And I hope it's due to our group classes. So Mark attended our previous class, which was called, it was an intensive class, which consisted of 24 lessons. And now we do another session of group classes, which are called How to Attack and Defend in Chess. So yeah, it seems that, well, I remember that since the moment we started, Mark improved a lot. So knight b5, exactly. Moreover, if the king escapes, it's even checkmate. Like that. If the king doesn't escape, their only option is to take, because no square is available for the king. So to take, and then they not only lose a rook, well, they totally lose a rook. Now you force the king to go to the d file back, then bishop e5 is a discovered check, and once the king moves again, then you finally take the rook. So you're a rook up. Yes, that's exactly how I wanted you to play. Fine, so not so obvious, but even after the queen exchange, the king doesn't look to be safe, and mainly because white develops initiative. So even after this trade, there is a bishop hanging. If it wasn't, and let's imagine it's not hanging, so it's already on b6, just castling kingside would solve most of the problems. There will be still pressure due to underdevelopment of black pieces, but this extra pressure is compensated with a pawn on b7 or with the pawn on a7. So black is a pawn up and they have partially a compensation. Fine. What else? Let's talk a little about a sudden attack, when it appears and so on. So well, okay, so when you play the game, at some moment there can be such a situation when one of the players is ready for the attack, and it's very important to not miss this moment. There are some preconditions for the sudden attack. For example, you have your piece's concentration on a certain part of the board. The enemy king is exposed like it was exposed or compromised like it was in this position. There can be some miscoordination of the enemy pieces or just underdevelopment. Also, some disadvantages in the pawn structure. Here, the black's pawn structure is actually fine, but it can be one of the preconditions that can tell you that, well, stop and think. Maybe you can initiate a sudden attack instead. Maybe it's not even attack on the king, but the attack on the enemy pawns, or you can chase enemy pieces that are not well coordinated, and because of that, new opportunities will appear. Okay, so, and when you're looking for a sudden attack, what moves you have to consider? Definitely strikes, such as checks, captures, and threats. What else? Pawn breaks, sacrifices, and a consequence of attacks, like a series of moves that create some threats to the enemy position. Well, actually, series of threats is called an initiative. So if you see that you can develop some initiative, consider doing a sudden attack. Let's take a look at our second example. Here, in this position, white, black played e5 to offer some counterplay in the center, and they were probably expecting white to continue with bishop h2, where else the bishop can go. g3 maybe too, but h2 is safe. However, there is something that I want you to notice here, and due to this feature of the position, I want you to find a tactical strike. Okay, so I see John suggests to sacrifice his bishop on f7. Can you please specify, maybe not, you shouldn't say the concrete line, but explain why you decided to start thinking about this move? What indicated you that probably there is an attack and bishop f7 is that move that may allow you to start such an attack? So because after that g5 and queen c4 are possible. Is there anything else that you wanted to underline in this position? Maybe instead of the, I mean, aside from that, that the enemy king is weak, do you see anything else that you can take advantage of or potentially can take advantage of? Okay, so Eros and Carlos said it. No, Eros, you're right. It's g4. So I'm not saying you should play g4 right away, but you should consider this. The enemy queen is trapped, can be trapped in some situations. And this is an extra factor to think about before you initiate bishop f7. g4 is questionable exactly at the moment, but it may work in some positions, especially when we already have our knight on g5. So yes, he started with this move. He started with bishop f7. And actually, bishop f7 isn't fully sound sacrifice. But in the practical game, I would play bishop f7, and I would recommend you playing bishop f7, because after bishop f7, black has to play a series of moves, series of only moves. And even if they find all these only moves, their maximum is to get the position approximately equal. So they can only equalize. So that's why, for example, the engine here marks it as a suspicious move, but it's a good practical decision to sacrifice the bishop on f7. How does it work? So, for example, king takes. They actually didn't take in the game, but taking was the best option. Knight goes to g5, where where the king moves. So definitely not to g8, because if it moves to g8 after queen c4, it is a disaster. It is a smothered mate, or it's a checkmate there. Queen f7, or a smothered mate like that. So check, king goes there. Then, well, you can take the rook if you want, but let's deliver a checkmate instead. And now doesn't matter whether they capture with a rook or the knight. So usually we capture with a rook, but this time let me illustrate that if there is a knight capture and nothing changes. King f7, knight f7 checkmate. Fine. So can they block this attack with something like that? No, I mean this attack with something like that. Yes, they can. But you take and then you threaten to exchange with a temper, so I don't think it changes anything. So king g8 is obviously a disaster. King f8 or e8. What about king e8, by the way? I don't think it changes our situation drastically. For example, queen here, threatening mate. What they can do? Take on f4? No, they have to defend this. How they can defend it? With rook d7. This is the only move I see. If you see anything else, show me. But I think it's only rook d7. Then what? Check on g8. No, check on g8 is not possible. Then you can play rook fd1. You can also just try to trade the knights, because once the knights are traded, you can go that way. Or g4, actually, yeah. Well, let's take a look at your suggestion. So rook d7, and then it's g4, queen h4, and then rook d1. Rook e7, still knight c4. Yeah, looks like a strong attack, so maybe they survive, but looks very suspicious. I actually prefer doing knight e4 right away in this position. Aiming to exchange and to, well, get my queen to g8, like that. So bishop here. Knight takes, I'm threatening with this. Yeah, I think it looks good. So according to what I see, they have to play this. Ah, no, this is a blunder. So they have to play this. Then I do that. Then I take there and take there. Well, this. Oh, wait, I have a better suggestion. What would you play here, by the way? Okay, queen takes rook and then collect here, but then they take there, and the bishop is under attack. There is a better move. There is this. King takes, knight h5, so you're threatening the rook. If they take there, they are down exchange. If they take here, They're still down exchange. It's even better. So what can I say? Well, it seems like it is a strong attack. I'm not sure if white calculated it. I'm sure it was mainly done by intuition. Some lines were calculated, but some not. So for example, after knight g5, king f8, queen c4, this line was calculated, I think. So rook d7. This time knight e4 doesn't look so strong because there is no queen g8. So g4, like you suggested, queen goes there, which is the only square, and knight e6. And again, where does he have to move? He cannot go neither to f7 nor to g8. So the question is whether two minor pieces are equal to rook in some positions. In some, yes, but only in some. Mainly, two minor pieces are better than a rook, usually. Even two minor pieces are better than a rook and pawn. In some endgames, when the rook is trying to advance a passed pawn, this rook and this pawn are better than two minor pieces. But usually two minor pieces are much better. However, at our previous example, if you remember, we had extra exchange, not just rook versus two minor pieces. It was extra exchange. And here, well, obviously, king g8, for example, doesn't work. Who can tell me why? Okay, so by the way, there is a good question from Alex on YouTube. I mean, this workshop is streamed on YouTube too, and you are likely, well, you're going to receive the recording of this event tomorrow. I'll publish on my YouTube. So the question is, oh, well, Alex purchased all my courses on chessworld.com, and he wants to know which course to start with. Well, it's a good question. It depends on your level, and it depends whether you want to start, if you want to work on certain openings. If you don't need to work on the openings, but want something that improves your understanding, I would recommend starting working on planning guide for club players. This. And there is also the one which is called Winning Principles. Let me search for it. I changed the title, that's why I don't remember. Exactly the name of this course. Winning strategies. It's called winning strategies. So the two ones I want you to start are planning guide and winning strategies. Okay. So bishop g5, queen h3. That's right. And then you have a discovered attack. Like that. So the king has to move only to e8, because if e7, then at least there is this move. Maybe you first do this, queen h3, and then you take on g7, winning the piece, because g4 is protected by the queen, there is no perpetual check. So let me show you. King e7, bishop g5, this, the knight is pinned, so g4 is even protected, and you're about to invade the enemy camp with this move, and then take on f6. So it's winning. That's why king e8. But if king e8 is played, then yes, it is approximately equal position. White is down a piece, but has some initiative here. So for example, bishop g3, queen h3, and well, I don't know, maybe this. So the attack continues, and this is where I think the white player Gennady Ageychenko stopped his analysis. He thought, okay, so I have some attack. I'm not sure if it works, but I cannot calculate. And I'm not sure that this position will be reached because, well, he has to find king e8. He has to find rook d7 before. Okay, instead of queen h3, isn't there this move? No, I don't think so. At the very least, I can take on c8 and win material back. I don't know if I should include this move first or I should take here. Maybe I should take here first because then I'm threatening to win a knight. So white is a pawn up. I think white is likely to win this game. So knight a5 doesn't stop the attack. Okay, let's go back. So what does it tell us? Knight g5 is very promising. However, it's more intuitive sacrifice to let them take the bishop on f7. And actually, well, a very specific situation happened in this game. Well, I, for example, do not usually trust my opponent. If I see that he took on f7, I should calculate all that stuff and make sure that capturing on f7 is a blunder. And only then I played king f8. Here, it seems that the black player, who was Evgeny Gig, realized that he either didn't visualize that lines where he could survive, or he simply trusted to his opponent, thinking that that guy definitely calculated that line, so accepting doesn't work because it's the most obvious thing. Let me just play with the king. But making a king move was actually a disaster. That was a significant mistake. What would you continue here? Now white is completely winning. There is nothing that they can do. No suggestions? Yes, thanks Bartholomew. Yes, just bishop b3 and queen c4. So they took here, otherwise they are completely losing. What else they can do? If they do not win the bishop, then what are they struggling for? Queen c4, threatening mate, rook d7, rook d1, rook e7. How would you play? No, g4 wasn't so promising. Instead of bishop b3. Well, bishop b3 definitely with queen c4. Threatened checkmate here, as well as checkmate on g8 once this knight gets distracted. So 94, yeah, I think 94 is a possibility here. If you play 94, how can they continue? They can play bishop e6. Yeah, they can play bishop e6. So that's why rook d6. And rook d6 stops both. Bishop e6, then you just take, as well as threatens with this, bishop takes and checkmate on g8. So there is not much we can discuss after that. Rook takes c6, winning material. Bishop h3, doesn't make much sense. Rook f6, so queen g4 makes no sense. In case of this move, what would you suggest? Queen b5 or queen g8? What is better? Everything is winning. There is also knight e5. Just don't blunder checkmate. Okay, let it be just this, king d8 and rook d1. How to defend? It seems to me that this is the only move, but then they have at least to sacrifice the queen. Yeah, so you take, they sacrifice the queen at least. So bishop f6, queen g8, king d7, and it's still completely losing. Just rook d1, king c6, and queen c4. Well, moving means lose the game in a few moves or sacrifice the queen. So they decided to block, but even this doesn't help because after this move, it's game over. The king has to stay closer to the queen like that. And in this position, you have multiple options. I think the best one, well, maybe you can tell me which is the best one. Knight d5. Well, no, knight d5 is not the best one. Knight d5, you win the queen. Rook d6. Yes, I agree. So I think it's rook d6. Let me first show you knight d5. So knight d5, if king goes a5, you take there. So that's why they have to sacrifice the queen, but it's not checkmate. You take it and then win the game. But rook d6 seems to lead to immediate mate. Yeah, so king c7, queen c5, rook d8. Bishop goes back, then you take this bishop. If this move, it also leads to a checkmate, like that. If, for example, king goes there, then yes, it's checkmate too. It's not the end, it's b5 and queen b5 finally. Why not queen d5? What do you mean? Ah, good point. Okay, there was something with this move that I wanted. Oh, actually, maybe you're right. Yeah, it seems to me that you are right with knight d5 immediately, because then I still have to play this move and win the queen. Because I thought there is a mate with queen b5 coming. You're right. So knight d5 is better. Okay, perfect. Let's continue. We have more examples for today, so let's work. Let's take a look at this position. So what can we generally say about the position? Well, I think the black's position is consolidated. They are better, but just very little. And their rook is more active. Occasionally it can be the object of the attack, but it's in the enemy camp and it distracts the white pieces. There is a pressure on c3, so at the moment they have to find a way of how to defend this knight or which square to move it to. And this knight is well placed. It stops bishop d4 as well as gets the control over the f4 square too. And there is no bishop g5 with a temper, so looks like black pieces are better prepared. This bishop at the moment is doing just some attack on c3, but looking at this pawn structure, we can declare that such a bishop can become a really good bishop. Most of the pawns are on light squares, and a complex of dark squares is weak, and later in the game, black definitely can take advantage of that. It's not black to move, so here, white better retreat the knight to e2 to keep these squares protected. Then, for example, like h5, rook cd1, and it looks okay. This is a weakness, so maybe bishop should defend it. Anyway, in the game, knight b1 was played, and this move leads to some underdevelopment of the white pieces. Well, this is one thing that you should notice. And what is the second thing that I want you to recognize in this position? And because of these two things together, I want you to initiate a sudden attack. Well, the white king is weak, right? This is actually the third thing. It's less important than the second factor that I wanted you to find, but yes, it's good that you noticed it. Okay, so Erosh repeats repeats this factor, the king's vulnerability, and that the complex of the dark squares is weakened around the king. Right, but thanks Mark and thanks John. You are absolutely right, and also Snihin. So you're absolutely right that we should take advantage of the domination over the dark squares. So Rook a3 sacrifice. This is a brilliant move. So, well, usually when you play on chess.com gives you a brilliant move to almost any of your sacrifices, if they are sound. But this time, Rook a3 deserves two exclamation marks. Definitely. Why? This rook cannot be taken neither with the queen nor with the rook. So they took with a rook, but let's say the queen takes. Then queen h4. What are you going to do? So imagine the bishop on g3. It's over. However, aside from this, there is bishop d4 threat. If they, for example, continue with this move, covering d4, you have bishop f5. Okay, maybe in this position, they should play queen f4 to try to trade the queens, but bishop d4 anyway. This time they can block it. What do you think? How to continue? We can always win the exchange back, but then what is our advantage? Yeah, so queen g5, adding pressure. What this move is also doing, for example, they defend like that. Queen h6 works too, I agree, but I like queen g5 more because of one feature. Here you can play bishop e5, so nobody cares about the pin. Well, this pin only allows you to win material back, but our goal is not winning material. Our goal is a checkmate on h2. And queen g5 is important because it allows you to play bishop g3. You can win the exchange here, or maybe you decide to go back and take it there, but let's first try to checkmate. Okay, so that's why queen e3 is unsound. Rook e3. Queen g5, same threat. Also, there is a pin. What do you think is the best way for white to play? Because bishop d4 is a real threat. Bishop f5 is also a threat. Maybe even white is already losing, but is there anything they can do to survive? Mm. Well, Erosh, it's too early to resign. So objectively, the evaluation of this position is like -1. f4 and rook f3. So let's try f4. So knight f4, rook f3. I'm just calculating whether bishop g4 works. It seems not. Maybe it does work. So bishop d4 you mean in this position, and if they take? Well, if you do knight e2, you sacrifice your second piece. No, bishop d4 not. Yeah, rook d3 instead also makes sense. Yeah, we will talk about it. So f4. So here, okay, I don't know. Let's just, well, bishop e5 works, but let's just take here. Oh, what did I want to do? I wanted to play this move, and after queen e4, I wanted to include this check, so blocking is a disaster. So the king must move to h1, and then I wanted to play this move. But then I realized that there is queen h2. And after this move, I wanted to take, and then I was trying to evaluate if I have any benefits in this position. Looks like it's safe. Too much material was sacrificed. So that's why just rook e4. Let's keep here. If knight c3, you have rook d4 always. Oh, wait. If knight c3, the knight is no longer defending the queen. So knight h3, of course. And you win the queen. Okay, so rook d3. I think it's the same. Maybe bishop e5 first. Something similar happened in the game. But the best option was actually e5, and that was crucial. Why such a move is required? On the one hand, it allows black to capture on e5, but then white could return exchange back and avoid issues with their king's position. So d takes e5, queen takes, knight takes, and white is only one pawn down. Of course, at grandmaster's level, white definitely loses here. But at least it was something. They played rook d3, offering a queen straight and trying to take on d6, but it didn't work at all. Rook takes d6, bishop e5. So they are ready to sacrifice this exchange here. So they played rook d1, but after queen g3, it's over. So how to play? We are threatening to do what? To deliver a check, forcing the king to go to h1, sorry, and then queen h2. How it can be stopped? Well, with a queen sacrifice only. Well, they play king h1 move, but it still fails. How would you continue in this position? Looks like knight h3 this time doesn't work well because the queen is still defending the second rank. What would you suggest? Knight e2. Well, knight e2 queen. Oh, knight e2 works because there is queen h2 threat. Knight e2, queen goes to h6. What about that? Okay, maybe you can play this move and then combine it with knight e2. And if the queen takes, it works perfectly well. But if the bishop takes, it doesn't work so. Okay, so let's say bishop g3. There is no counterplay, which is good. But they can try to move the bishop away to let the king to escape. So this, and this, and this is how they escaped. Well, you can take here always. For example, trade the queens and take, but yeah, you should be winning. So yeah, it should be winning. Okay. So here, yes, you can take there right away and then continue your attack. This is a winning position. But instead, there is a quick win with knight d3 simply. What about queen h7? What do you mean? Which queen h7? In which position? So king h1. Queen h. So knight e2. Bishop e2. Well, I think I played. You mean queen h2 right away, but he goes to there. And then what? So here I played bishop g3 to stop this move. Okay, fine. So knight d3 was played in the game. Knight d3. Queen h6 was played. So why this knight is poisoned? Because it's a checkmate in one. So they have to play this. And then it's knight f2. And after king g1, it was finally knight h3. If pawn takes, queen h2 is made. If queen takes, well, there is a bishop. There is a bishop in our camp, and then we can still threaten with checkmate. Oh, well, we threaten to take here. We threaten to regroup our pieces. Pawn can't take. Yes, the pawn cannot take. Yeah, good point. Of course, the pawn cannot take. It's a check. So it's completely losing. Let's say they retreat back, and we continue with, or maybe they retreat back here. Well, it's just queen for a rook. There is not much to discuss. So this king moves. Then let's take on g2. Okay, and then play queen h6. Yeah, that's right. Fine. So this is how the game ended, and the only 3 drawbacks of the white's position were undevelopment with the knight, uh, weakness of the complex of dark squares, as well as the king's vulnerability. Once you see it, you should take advantage of it by do a sudden attack, even if it assumes that you should sacrifice some small material, for example, exchange. Okay, so we have one example to continue with. This is our last example. However, before we continue with this example, I would like to remind you that all workshops are free. However, if you would like to support me, if you like and enjoy these webinars, of course, you can share it with your friends, chess players, so more people will join it. However, if you want to support me financially, you can use this link and donate. Let me copy the link to the chat and explain how it works. So you click this button, a new window appears, then you enter the amount that you want to donate, and then click PayPal button. It redirects you to your PayPal account. You enter it, so it's paypal.com, and then money are automatically delivered to my PayPal account. I would appreciate any help. It helps me to prepare all materials better. Also, I have to pay for my assistant's job. He helps to prepare content from which I select the games for you. Anyway, let's continue. So let's take a look at this position. It looks like white located his pieces in the center. There are dark squares weakened a little, especially d4, e5, that black can occupy. But this time the king is relatively safe. This knight is not well placed. It also stops the enemy rook from joining the place of action. So white played knight d5, which is a logical move, centralizing the knight, taking several squares into under the control, as well as f4, for example. Yeah, thank you, Carlos. So let's continue. I hope you can join our future events. I'm also doing, I'll be streaming Title Tuesday on Tuesday, so you can watch it on Twitch. There are group lessons, but this will be lesson number 6. So we are going to finish a cycle in 2 weeks, in 3 more weeks, and then I will announce the new one. So if you want, you can join it too. Okay, 95. Well, what do you think is logical for black in this position? Something like knight d4 or bishop d4. I don't want to exchange such a bishop. Why so? Because it covers the holes like f6, for example, and having the bishop, for example, somewhere here would make a lot of sense. Maybe bishop f5 is a good move. What do you think? Yeah, I would play bishop f5. Why not? Aha. Okay, so here, John, the black queen is misplaced. Probably we can trap this queen. Yeah, especially if they play knight f6. This is the move they played, and that was a significant mistake. Looks like it's a logical move, but it was careless. So who can tell me what's wrong with this move? I don't think we can fully trap the queen, but we may base our ideas on the fact that this queen has only fewer squares to escape. So knight f6, yes, it limits the queen, but how should we react in this position? Yes, it may later result in some troubles. Okay, so Bartholomew suggests knight f5. Interesting. And if g takes f5, you want to play bishop g5? I don't think you can do it with the knight on e6. Knight f5 can be played occasionally. First, e takes f. Can you please specify? So this. I didn't get the point. So knight f5, g takes, e takes. Okay. So how should I play? Let me take there. If you take my knight, I take your bishop, threatening the rook. And this is poisoned. No, I don't think it works. So I don't think that this is playable. What then? Simply knight takes, and you lose material. You already lost a knight. So after knight f6, you have to play a better move. Any suggestions? 97. No, 97 is the wrong direction. There is also the black knight covering this square. It was rook takes f6. How does it work? Well, now the bishop has to take, otherwise they are down a piece. But this queen has fewer squares and has to protect this bishop. And once the queen goes to these two positions, well, it cannot go to h5, but if, let's say, it can, then knight f6 is a fork. Now we have to play knight f5. But after this move, which again is a forcing move, because I mean this move is forced because if they play something else like queen g4, queen h5, we take with a fork, and the queen has no squares except these two, so they have to do this. But after g3, again the queen can only go to h3. Moving the queen to h3 this time means we can play bishop f1, right? And finally trap the queen. For example, knight g5. No, well, we can take the queen, or we can take here. King moves, then we take there, and the queen is still trapped. Right, perfect. So bishop f1 works. So that's why in this position, where else they can move their queen? To g4? No, it's a blunder. h5, it's a blunder. So they played bishop c3 to let the queen escape. Queen takes looks good. Then you can play knight f6, for example, but they decided to take with a pawn. Queen goes to d8. Here you are still down exchange, but this time for this exchange you have enough compensation. This piece is not participating in the game and your pawn participates in the attack. So did it make sense to capture with the queen? I think yes. And then doing this. I think it still works. But taking with the pawn was fine too. So knight goes that way, otherwise the knight goes to d4 and we have to exchange our bishop. So that was the reason of b takes c3. Bishop g5. The queen is under attack, queen goes to f8, and then we win more material. This. And then we take on d7, and we are ahead in material. Can they play a better move? So definitely not this. Then it's knight f6 with a fork on the queen. If this move, it's knight e7 with a fork, so it's game over. Maybe knight g7 was a bad move, but where else this knight go? f8, it's basically the same situation. Oh, actually, it's a slightly different situation, because this time the queen can move to the edge of the board, because knight f6 doesn't win a bishop. What do you think how to play here? I think it's a totally winning position. Bishop h6. I like your move. What else? Bishop e7 by Carlos, okay. Bishop f6 by Georgios. I think the best option among all is bishop f6 because it covers h8 square. The key idea is queen g5, and it's impossible to stop it. This never works, so nothing else works, and you also, well, you also allow your queen to go to g7. So I don't think they can escape. So let's say they try with this move. Now, if they don't want to lose the game, they have to play knight g6. So queen g5, knight g6, you take it and you still win. If the king escapes, it doesn't escape further because he cannot cover the e7 square. Retreating with the queen is impossible. So that's why I prefer queen bishop f6 to cover these two squares too. But I think even bishop h6 would work too. So knight g7, bishop g5, and it's over. After this check and knight g7, white already has extra material. Queen f7, knight goes back to not lose this pawn. Knight h5, but this is just a technical position. It doesn't deserve our much attention. So two bishops versus rook with queens on the board and the king being exposed. What are we talking here about? So these or even these are the next moves. h6 to let him to escape there. Queen d6, rook e8, and finally bishop d5. So there is one more move left. It's this. But after queen d7, the next move is queen If the next move is queen takes e7 or queen takes f7, because what he can do is only to block with these pieces. The king has no squares available. And this is how white managed to win. Okay, fine. So we are done today. We're done for today with our examples. What I want you to remember is that in order to figure out whether there is a sudden attack and deposition, you should almost every move evaluate the position and try to figure out what changes with your move and what changes with the move of your opponent, and try to notice the drawbacks that this or that move of your opponent creates. So for example, he plays his queen to the edge of the board. Well, he definitely wants to attack something there with his queen, but what disadvantages is about this move? Try to figure out it and then try to turn it in your favor. This is my recommendation. So always pay attention to what's going on. This is what I actually teach in my chessable course. Evaluate before you calculate. I'm sure many of you have this course purchased already. Fine, so we are done for today. There will be next webinar next Sunday. Please do not miss it. So hope to see everyone then, and of course there will be announcements of my activities that I'm going to share with you, that I'm going to stream. So if you would like to participate, you're welcome. I would appreciate it too. That's all for today, and at least we can meet next Sunday. Bye-bye.